We're almost wrapped up with the attributes. A couple chapters this week or today, 26 and 27. We'll finish it out tomorrow. So please, please, please make sure that you have got Fanatical Prospecting ready to go. Make sure letting other people know. Let's get our teams plugged in here. This is where we're getting back into the nuts and bolts that are going to help us get through these shifts and changes that are happening so quickly in our industry right now. So as always, man, I got green highlights everywhere in these last two chapters that we did today. And yet I want to hear from you guys. This is a mindset mastermind, not coach bloviating. So what do you got?
I was reading a bunch of extra chapters. Could you please tell me exactly which ones we're doing to say? Did you say 26?
Absolutely. We are doing 26 and 27.
Got it.
Dynamic subordination, talking about how successful teams are passing the torch, and then kind of the others, the outliers of attributes that are slightly different in his analysis.
Thank you.
I found the chapter 27 where it's more like a sliding scale, depending on which side you look at it, whether it's patience or impatience or fear of rejection, that kind of stuff. Like I found it was more of like a spectrum look at things as opposed to, one particular attribute.
Yeah, I loved how he described it more as a teeter-totter because it has every quote attribute had an equal and opposite attribute on these three. And both have their strengths and weaknesses, which was kind of cool. And you can even slide all the way across depending on how you're analyzing a situation. So, yeah, I saw a lot of me in these places, Ryan. That was awesome. If you want to dissect a little more, feel free. What else?
Well, he was talking about like that your fear of rejection goes into your it puts your narcissism in the center of it. I thought that was kind of an interesting take on it, because like whether your fear of rejection is concerned with the opinions of others, it puts yourself at the center. That's like, to me, that was like of your narcissism. Like it made me really think about it. Like, okay, this is about me, of my fear of rejection, as opposed to like my own well-being feelings, as opposed to like, the whole, if you look at it from a third party kind of standpoint.
Yeah, it was interesting in those sections because he set up at the top of page 240. Narcissism puts your opinion of yourself at the center, while fear of rejection is concerned with the opinions or perceived opinions of others.
Yeah.
And so, this term narcissism kicks in as a negative, as a self-centeredness, as a almost psychological diagnosis. But later on page 241, as he's talking about, almost all of us have some form or other of this fear of rejection, because that's how we were, created. Back to 240, we evolved to be social creatures, to instinctively want to belong to a group. And with that, fear of rejection occurred. Because as our evolution, if you were thrown out of the group, that could almost mean uncertain death. Yet as we have evolved and grown and moved through society, talks about people who really get past this fear of rejection. And he starts on the bottom, page 241. But for those who truly aren't constrained by the thoughts of others, who sincerely enjoy separating themselves from the herd, they open themselves up to endless possibilities. They can explore unfettered and wander paths, intellectual, creative, even physical, that others often overlook or reject. Some of the most famous and influential iconoclasts possess this quality. Steve Jobs, Richard Feynman, Vincent van Gogh are examples of people who likely would not have broken the ground they broke if they had cared what the group thought. Here's the other place that I would love for this to show up. is allowing yourself to kind of slide down that fear of rejection or that response to rejection for conversations. If you in your heart know that you're having conversations for the purpose of building incredible relationships, that mindset, I'm doing this because I intend to build relationships, that'll get rid of that fear of rejection. If you're going into it for, I'm doing this because I want a transaction, that will raise that fear of rejection. You guys have the ability to control that based on your mindset going into it. What else has caught your attention so far?
My mic is hot and I just lost it.
We got you, Dorothy, and then we got Glenna right after.
I got what, page 231.
Talk to us.
About line 8 down, creativity and sociability. That's absolutely real estate. You got to be on your toes. You got to be able to move fast, because you can't, when you're in the learning phase, you're memorizing scripts. But if you go in there and sound like a ba 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 ba, you lost them. You got to connect with your people and float with where they are to bring them to where you want. And that's one of the things that brought me into real estate, because I realized that in the classroom, I was selling those kids on doing more homework than they thought they were going to do, and they loved it. And so I thought, hey, I should get paid for that. And if you can, at the end, I want to go back to that teacher in that classroom thing, because she blew it.
Well, it's only a blow it if the outcome is really not successful for the individual. So absolutely agree with what you said up here, though, on we've got to improve these attributes. We've got to build these to have better conversations. Back to the blowing it piece. You never know. So I want to give you a great example. Day before yesterday, I did a 1-hour third-party validation call for an agent. And the third-party agent opened the conversation with, I don't want to talk about your company. I don't want to hear about it. I got no plans on moving. I'm not doing anything. Awesome. So we had a 1-hour coaching conversation where he got defensive. He got angry. He said, I think even less of you guys now than I did when I started. It was a fierce conversation that went on for an hour. And of course, the agent who brought him to my doorstep was like irritated, angry. The relationship was blown in his eyes. He created all this story. Russ, you blew it. Well, know that about an hour and a half later, that individual started texting me. That third-party agent started writing me these books of what he was doing, how he was going to behave differently. The next day, more books on what he's already changed on his schedule to improve. And we're now in amazing conversation 48 hours later, because my courage, my willingness not to care was the right fit for him. It also could have gone a different direction. Glenna, you were next up.
Well, I was going to say, when you talk about changing your mindset, when you make the phone call as building relationships instead of transaction, that gave me an aha moment, because when I got into real estate, I hate selling. So for a long time, I didn't want to get into real estate. I had a relative that was doing it and I didn't like it. So, but when I finally got in, I was building relationships. So now I look at my calls as transactions. That's why I hate making the calls. So now I have to change my mindset into relationships, building relationships. Thank you, Coach.
You are got it. I wrote that down actually based on the video we watched yesterday. Building meaningful relationships. That's really our job. I want to bounce to Kim if she'll get her mic hot, because not everybody's reading the chat. And I think you've got some brilliant nuggets here, Kim. So let's hear from you.
Good morning, guys. So it's funny. This week I took 4 contracts, and I had a handful of agents reach out to me and say, "How'd you do it?" And I didn't answer them. And I think the reality of it is that we're in the relationship business. We're not in sales. We are in the relationship business. We're making friends business. You need to be Mr. and Mrs. Popularity and have a lot of friends. And I think that's the key to success in this industry.
I agree.
We're in the friendship business. So the relationship business is step 1. Kim took it to the next level, which is really accurate. How many of you have thought you were friends with somebody, though you didn't stay in contact, and they went and used somebody else for their real estate transaction?
And what?
I know it's happening.
There's a buzzing going on.
What was that, Dorothy?
There's a
That's because Kim's out getting her exercise in at the same time that we're having a conversation. So she had a little background wind. That's all. Ryan, I saw your mic was hot earlier.
Yeah, one of the things on 242, it talks about competitiveness versus non-competitiveness as that spectrum. And I came from the military, came from coaching college sports, playing college sports. The biggest thing that I pulled from this is whether you're competitive or not, you feel that you're non-competitive, it doesn't make that you are any more or less successful based on that. I find that was kind of an interesting point that he brought up. I also don't take like winning and losing just because I didn't get a deal or I didn't get an appointment. It's not a win or a loss in the way that I structure my day. If I'm, if I'm an agent that's doing listings, if I did not pull a listing that day, it's not a win or a loss. I think people will burn themselves out if they're over competitive in the way that they structure their mind over that type of thing as well. So they have to find a balance with the competitiveness. That's in my opinion of it.
And not your opinion and an accurate opinion, it's kind of a great opinion, because you're right. Some of us get over competitive and it actually damages us. When I was in the software space and the home inspection space, and I was the leader into that, I created the very first CRM for the home inspection space. And I was very competitive and maybe a little belligerent, maybe a little arrogant, and maybe a little cocky and almost threatening people that were trying to come into space and copy me. And it didn't serve me at all. Definitely was a great opportunity for me to learn through that experience and maybe soften just a little. Not too much, though. Justin, what do you got, brother?
So my story is I'm a little behind with reading this book, although I really, really like it and appreciate it. Yesterday, I was in the car for a long time, and I listened to some stuff on YouTube as I was driving. I found a book from Mr. Schoaf. He was the mentor to Don and Tony's mentor. I'm drawing a blank now. So Mr. Schoaf wrote, right. So Mr. Schoaf was mentor to Jim Rohn. So I listened to his book. I listened to another book yesterday, and the nuggets I got from there tie like directly to what Ryan was just saying. About not looking at things as a win or loss or whatever. What they were talking about was sometimes we expect that we're going to have this relationship or this listing or what the win is going to look like. And the thing that happens instead is a stepping stone, the lesson that we need to learn to be able to later have that same win that we're looking to have now. So it was just kind of a really cool reframe for me to think that the things that I have been looking at that maybe they're failures or coming up short is just that like next step or rung in the ladder to get to the ultimate place where I think I should be.
Excellent. and doing the work and stepping into it and learning, even if it's at your own pace, a little behind. I love that you're bringing these other content. By the way, for all of you that are looking at other content, just like Justin is, if there's something that we should consider bringing into this room, by all means, let me know. I had no idea about the attributes until Kim said, Russ, I just read this and we should bring it in the room. And I think it's been an amazing read for us as we wrap it up. So what else do you guys have? Aaron, I see your mic's hot. Thank you. Fresh blood.
Yeah, well, I actually do have some foreign content to chew on for everybody. I love watching long form interviews on YouTube. And where did I go? Sorry. Can you still hear me?
We hear you. Yep.
One of the concepts that I came across was like the theta brainwaves. And there's a brain game that people play where they put some device on your head and it measures theta brainwaves, which is basically the most attractive brain state that we can get into. And it has to do with the competitive mindset. And the way you win this game is by not focusing on this game. So as soon as you start focusing on the competition, your brain state goes into this, it goes into a competitive mindset like you're talking about. And the person who does that the most loses. And it has a little ball that rolls one way or the other. And as soon as you start focusing on the position of that ball, it will stop rolling in the direction that you would win. And so what that translates into, I think, into the terms of this conversation is like listening and creating space and thinking a little bit and taking a few more seconds before responding to somebody, not so much as like a winning device for a competitive mindset, but actually as a way of putting yourself in their position, listening to them, and making that work. And it was interesting because yesterday I was relisting a property that expired for after about a year. It's a tough one. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. And I was going because there's a neighbor who sold it to my client, and I was just going to tell him that we're putting it back on the market. There's been a little dispute over the driveway, and I reminded them of that, just let them know that what's coming. And while I was going down to try to find him after talking to his wife, I bumped into his son-in-law and his daughter who built this cabin that I'm selling for my client. And they texted me last night after having a long meandering conversation about God, awakening, all these other things that had nothing to do with real estate. They're like, we're buying this place. So it was that exact concept that we're talking about, like letting go of yourself and just following others and creating those relationships. And I think the idea of creating space when we have an idea about how we want to win this, you end up pushing people away. So it's a good one.
Yeah, it's interesting. So many times, Aaron, when we think we know how the path should go and we attempt to force it that way, it doesn't work out. And as you're saying, if we keep working the way we know we're supposed to work, yet be open to what else shows up, magic can happen and happen quickly. Awesome.
So,
by the way,
Kim, you had a question. Creating space is active listening and thoughtful reflection rather than immediate response and trying to prove a point. That's my understanding of it. That's how I would say you create space.
Phenomenal. Thank you. Dorothy, you have something to add on top of that?
Yes, I do. I agree with him. And it also connects back into teaching. And I'm going to compare this teacher to you. The teacher, if she saw the kid cheating, she also saw him texting and missing class. Educare means to lead out of darkness, and you do it. She should be in rapport with every single one of her students, meaning she has some kind of connection of knowing where that kid is and bringing him one step forward. She could have fallen into step with him as he was leaving class and say, hi, how are you doing? What's going on? And invited him to her office to have a private conversation and help the guy out. Tutor him once a week, help mom find out whatever. You, sir, Have that kind of relationship with each one of us. You know us, even though you never say that. And I feel the door is always open. We can all text you, email you, call you, show up, meet you at a convention, whatever. And you also know the times that I've shown up when I didn't read the lesson. I was just sitting there like a bump on a log, hoping to pick up something. And you also know when I've read it, but I didn't say anything. You can feel it. So hats off to you. And this other teacher needs to take a lesson.
Well, thank you for those words of love, Dorothy. I appreciate that. And I will say that, yes, my door is always open. And this rapport piece, though, we kind of drift potentially in and out. And I bet it's for all of you. There's people in your life that you have allowed the connection to drop. Now, maybe you've chosen that, and that's awesome. They're a negative person. You're getting them out of your way, getting them out of your space so you can free up for some more positivity. And there are others that maybe in a moment of haste made the request. Fine, we're done. And now are reopening that door. So make sure you allow that door to be open. I just want you guys to turn on your RAS to maybe there's some folks right now in your world on the consumer side that you need to start rebuilding and building a meaningful relationship again. And one other thing, Dorothy, to you, and again, it's a little different than your other teacher stuff. If you guys haven't read the material, I want you here. I want you with cameras on. I want you engaging and having a conversation. And it's okay. There are days that I've missed reading the material. And if you've read it, I want your cameras on and I want you participating because there's no wrong perspective. There's no wrong opinion. We're looking to help each other. Again, that's why it's a mastermind. I see in the text nuggets popping because what you guys say is so much stronger than having me just sit here and teach. So the more I can hear from you guys, the better. And Carrie, I see your mic's hot. So bring it, my dear.
I was just going to say when I was reading the chapter on, I don't know what it was, the first chapter that we were supposed to read, the one thing that I really liked, it was talking about, he was doing the amoeba effect and leadership. And I totally related to that. I was like, oh my God, that's that. I feel like I am that. Like, I am so comfortable. Like, everybody should be strong enough in their own attributes or their own skills and talents that just like that, anybody could step up and lead at any moment. And not that I have a team and not that I've been doing anything, but that's exactly what I imagine for myself. If I did have more than just me, like, yeah, please do, because I certainly don't. And I want that person to do that. And then if they can fill that in and, lead different, and we all lead in a different way, different style. I just think that would make the perfect partnership, whatever, team, whatever you want to call it. I loved that.
Well, thank you for bringing that in because it's something I wanted to make sure we talked about today, Carrie, because that's what's happening and what I desire for this room is for each and every one of you by speaking up, leading the room in that moment. This is a great mastermind has that dynamic leadership component. And my job is to kind of facilitate from the middle and let all you guys lead these conversations. Now, the other half of that means that we also give grace as we are the followers in that moment. And we have an open mind and not necessarily a response ready to go. And even if we were going to speak at the same time, we pause and listen, practicing that piece, Aaron, where we're creating that space. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. What else you guys have?
Well, just another little sidebar from Douglas Adams, which I think kind of sums it up nicely, is his definition for how to fly, which is to throw yourself at the ground and miss. And I think of that as like the process of preparation, and then forgetting everything and just being where you're at with the people that you're with. So you know where you're going, you develop momentum by becoming familiar with all the processes in the background. And then you go into this situation, you put all that away, and you can just be where you're at. And the confidence comes from not trying. Like, the situation where you go and you know somebody and you can't remember their name. You know them and you can't remember their name because you're like right here and their name is way over there in the background in some other meeting. And then like you walk away because you didn't ask them their name and then it comes to you. It's also the difference between that focused mind state and the diffuse mindset, right? And so I'd say like focus, 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 and then let go. That's my thought.
Well, only in America, I truly believe that as someone who has traveled, because we tend to have a restricted vulnerability here for some reason. You can, and I'll use the grocery store as the example, run into somebody at the grocery store that you know, yet like Aaron said, you don't remember their name, and have a conversation, not knowing the context of where you know, and leave that conversation going, who the hell was that? Having never asked, having never connected the dots. And at the same time, they're doing the same thing. And yet you're in your head thinking you're going to look bad by asking, I know we know each other. I'm not connecting the dots because we're seeing them in a different context than we normally do. If you were always seeing them at the gym and maybe even got their name once at the gym, your brain still has that compartmentalized. Ryan, Jim, that's where we know each other. That's where we communicate. And then all of a sudden I'm seeing him dirty gym clothes. I see him in, his suit ready to go on a listing presentation at the grocery store. I'm like, how do I know this guy? You get to ask now. You get to be vulnerable. By the way, vulnerable was one of these attributes that we talked about working on. Vulnerability, authenticity, leaning into the conversation, which again are more reasons I want you talking up here. Glenna, what do you got, my dear?
I was just saying, I thought that only happens to me. Have a full conversation and don't remember the person's name. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
We've all done it. And to this point, we're going to start shifting and letting go of, again, that fear of rejection tied into that. Guys, it is almost 10:30, at least here on the East Coast. So let's wrap this up. Again, tomorrow we are reading the last two chapters in here before the acknowledgments, as well as kind of covering everything. So come in fired up, ready to have a communication, ready to have a conversation about this stuff. And it is Thursday, so conversation time this afternoon. We'd love to see you guys there leaning in. I'm thinking of making some changes there, so watch for that. And then most importantly, make sure you're inviting people and showing up Monday as we kick this piece off. We're getting back into the skill set, back into the work. And this very well could change your fourth quarter, as well as the other agents and business owners helping them do the same thing.